one shouldn't ever use the word hope when one is talking about Wolfensberger, unless you are talking about citizen advocacy, where I know that he felt there was great hope in the idea of ordinary citizens providing help, freely given help, to vulnerable people.
If we can help people who live good, ordinary, valued, comfortable lives in our community, if we can ask those people to sort of consciously put their minds into neutral, to slip back into neutral, and do some thinking in neutral about how they were raised, about what they think, about why they think that, about their conscious mind and their unconscious mind. If we can ask people individually, which is, at least for me, how I do it, to get into neutral and let's do some thinking. And then on the other side of that, if we can meet an individual person who has a disability, where that idea of disability is sort of the billboard they stand in front of, and when people look at them, they see the big billboard rather than the person. If I can then sort of bring out the personhood in the person and get the D to kind of go down and get the P to kind of go up, and then I can help this person by getting them to go into neutral, to think a little bit differently about what they think they know. Sometimes you can help people find each other as people. And when you can help people find each other as people, that's a pretty powerful way for both people to sort of refigure out what the world looks like, is through their personal experience. And so that's the investment that I've made. And Wolf, of course, created the mechanism that I've invested in, which is the citizen advocacy model, which was his genius to develop a framework, a mechanism, a tool that encourages someone to become an inviter and to consistently over time invite individual people and communities to get to know one another better.
Well, the citizen advocacy scheme was designed in response to the age-old plaint of parents of handicapped children. What will happen to my child when I'm gone? In some way or another, this is what you hear parents saying and worrying about. And associated with that concern is one, who will love my child when I am gone? And the child may be very impaired and maybe not one that would be easily sought out by other people on purpose. And so it's very realistic for a lot of parents to ask that question.
Most of us have the idea subconsciously, or if we don't have the idea, we certainly have the habit of spending most of our time with people that remind us of ourselves. Disability, of course, people who have disabilities sometimes don't immediately remind us of ourselves. There's something there that we focus in on, and then we crank the magnifying glass up and amplify that. Once you see that, then it's pretty hard to see the person. And until you see the person, it's pretty hard to decide you're going to go through some personal change.
Many people would agree with me that citizen advocacy was probably Wolf's greatest achievement, or one of his greatest achievements. He was really committed to it. He invented it out of and then very coherently designed the model of citizen advocacy so that it would help to meet the cry of so many parents of people with disability as to what will happen to my son or daughter when I'm gone, not here to protect them.
Citizen advocacy, it starts with thinking about the situation of people with disabilities and other people who are in devalued status as well, that there's a social problem of the way people are treated by the rest of us.
Social role valorization and normalization give people a good question to ask. Why is it like this?
That set of questions that came out of the early 70s based on the normalization principles, that set of questions about what's the right thing to do here, what's real, what's really going on here, is it right, What's the right thing to do?
There's a reality in the lives of people with disabilities that they are more vulnerable to bad things happening to them. They've had more bad things happen to them, and that they need other people to be protectors, and protectors from harm and advocates for more richness and more opportunity in life.
I mean, some of that change was driven by rights. Let's help people get their rights. Public Law 94-142, the Pennhurst decision, etc. I think Citizen Advocacy asked a different question, which is a question that has to do with what does it mean to do the right thing by one another?
To really take somebody's interests and personhood very seriously and try to make their life better. So these are one-to-one matches generally, in which one person is really asked to look at a person as a person with a disability as a person and not a project and not a problem and not a patient, which are kind of all the different roles that people are cast into.
Citizen advocacy believes that people care, and citizen advocacy is inviting people to act on that caring.
My term project in my first course from Wolf was to begin a citizen advocacy office in Syracuse that still exists, that Sandy Bufus is associated with. I have the original incorporation papers. My mother was an attorney. I got her to do it for free.
The basic idea is that one person who has some kind of a disability, mental disability in most of the programs, gets matched up in a freely given, voluntary, unpaid, mutually rewarding, hopefully, relationship with a person who doesn't have a disability. And in a long-term relationship where the person who we call the advocate in citizen advocacy is a person who offers acceptance to someone who's experienced a good bit of rejection, and maybe even persistent and life-defining rejection, that there's an acceptance in a relationship that can't be there when there's a paycheck attached to it.
The biggest thing is you start with the person who we call the protege. That is the person who would benefit from an advocate. You get to know that person very well. And then you start imagining what qualities and what type of person would be the right person to be an advocate for this person. So it all starts from the person with the disability. The relationships can take a wide range of forms. Some are friendships, some are mentor relationships, some are formal relationships like representative payees, and we've recruited people as adoptive parents for a child that was in the foster care system. But the person who's the citizen advocate, their job is to really try to get to know that person and to respond and think about things that happen to that person as if they were happening to the advocate.
The whole scheme would be totally independent from the service system and would be free from conflict of interest, so that even the funding for the office, for the few paid people in such an office, would have to come from a source that was not in a conflict of interest position vis-a-vis the kinds of authorities that an advocate might have to confront. And that, by the way, has always been the Achilles heel of citizen advocacy, because funding that comes without an attachment of conflict of interest is extremely, extremely difficult to obtain. The vast majority of funds, such as go to service systems, come with attached conflicts of interest of all sorts.
It's not about people being broken. It's about the world having a deep crack in it that has to be healed.
So it's not about disability, it's more about community, which is kind of a nice realization after a while.
Like many other things, there was a passion about citizen advocacy in Canada shortly after Wolf lived and worked here. And there were citizen advocacy groups that were supported and funded. There was a national strategy to promote citizen advocacy. And it was probably one of the most significant things that our national organization did.
Problem was that, with few exceptions, there wasn't much of a national entity to promote this. And surprisingly, the parent associations after an initial burst of interest, did not make long-term commitments to the idea, which was very unwise and continues to be unwise, that they will often throw their efforts behind all sorts of service schemes, but not to something that is outside the service system and that deals with an issue that is not dealt with by anybody else.
Funding for citizen advocacy is always a struggle. Dr. Wolfensberger would teach us about this, that there's lots of money for bricks and mortar and for hiring staff people to be in direct relationship with somebody. Something like citizen advocacy gets called a soft service, that the money actually goes to operate a program, and the good that comes is given freely between the people and the relationships. So it can be a real struggle to get the money when funding gets cut because of budget cuts or whatever. Citizen advocacy is one of the things that oftentimes will get cut.
Right now, I'm getting lots of calls from nursing homes. The state of New York is going to be turning folks through Medicaid waiver monies from group homes into the nursing homes in order to create space, more residential space for the younger folks that are coming up through the fields and disabilities. And I am seeing the same issues in the nursing homes with not only people with disabilities, which is going to be horrendous once it hits, but with people who are considered from the general population. We've already created a relationship for one woman who has no family. I've been on 4 meetings now for people with no family who have needed someone there to represent them.
I do like to think that if over time we can at least create a glimmer of what it looks like when people that are pushed to the bottom and the edge come into the big room and get to be part of the big story and are not there as tokens, but are there as really the unexpected teachers and are there with their friends and their allies, that does create a different ethos and a different possibility.
In many ways, I've looked on citizen advocacy as it, not that it has been a great worldly success, the way it is now, just barely hanging on, but in that it has managed to call forth thousands of people to step up on a voluntary, unpaid basis and put themselves on the line on behalf of one other very, very dependent and society devalued person, and to ally themselves with that person in often such heroic action. And that's been one of the more satisfying things that I look back on.